for the click of 7, since we're a TV show now. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So welcome back for the last of 3 Shabbats that we'll be together before we take a little break for the winter. So we will meet next week when we will hear from Debbie Binder, who is the West Bloomfield Township Clerk. And she will, I wanted to, but I don't think I have permission to entitle this talk, The Adventures of a Michigan Elections Clerk, because I think that we're going to hear some interesting things. But I think she'll be talking to us about what it is like to run the election, what Propositions 1 and 2 will mean for the future, and hopefully it'll be very interesting. And then the following week, hopefully by now you know, Friday, December 16th at 6:30 p.m. is Super Supper. Did anybody hear that? Super Supper. It's our Super Supper Hanukkah celebration. This is one of the highlights of the year. You don't have to be a member to come, and everybody is welcome. And it's a big fundraiser for our Noah feeding center event that we have not been able to put together in person for a few years. But who knows, this year we may be able to put it together in person. We'll see, depending on how COVID's doing. Right now, as you all know, we're green. So masks are optional. We keep very consistent about that. If you have any questions about it, or you can volunteer to bring soup or bread or soap or actually canned foods, which is what we really need, then please talk to Audrey. And I was also asked to make one other announcement. This Sunday, a new social program, Euchre. How many of you have played Euchre? So Euchre is coming to town. Santa Euchre's coming to town Sunday at 1:30 p.m. right here in the old Congregation for Humanistic Birmingham Temple's Judaism things. All righty. Our readers tonight are Suzanne and Charles Paul, Natan Fuchs, Dan Ernst, Deborah Shanker, Lonnie Fleischer, Rosalie Young, and in a moment we will ask, what happened to my page here? In a moment we will ask the Formans to join us to light our candles. All right, I have to turn around because my page got severely messed up. And we'll begin, Arthur, if you would, with the first slide. When we meet each other on Shabbat, we think of shalom, peace. It's right there in the greeting. Shabbat has always been a symbol of peace. Our ancestors called it a taste of the world to come. The peace that they sought to create on Shabbat teased them with hopes that such serenity would one day prevail throughout the world. Perhaps it was just a fantasy, but it gave them comfort nonetheless. Today we understand that if we desire such a world, it must come through our own work. Perhaps Shabbat can remind us of that. Shabbat Shalom, to a Sabbath of peace. I'd like to invite Helen and Saul Foreman.
May the doors of our community be wide enough to receive all who hunger for love, all who are lonely for friendship. May they welcome all who have cares to unburden, gratitude to experience, and hopes to nurture. May the doors of our community be narrow enough to shut out pettiness and pride, envy and enmity.
May their threshold be no stumbling block to young or unsure feet. May they be too high to admit complacency, selfishness, and harshness. May this congregation be, for all who enter, the doorway to a richer and more meaningful life.
Not time. It is a pretty song.
Shabbat Shalom. As one with our forebears, we affirm that righteousness and enlightenment shall be our torch. We shall teach these values diligently to our children all the days of our lives. We shall endeavor to live by these values in the comfort of our homes or on cold and windswept roads. Whether adversity bows our heads, or fulfillment makes our spirits soar, our hands shall mete out justice to all, and our eyes shall be open to the light of truth. We shall emblazon our paths through life with this light as a beacon for all humanity.
When justice burns within us like a flaming fire, when love evokes willing sacrifice from us, when, to the last measure, full measure of selfless devotion, we demonstrate our belief in the ultimate triumph of truth and righteousness, then goodness encompasses our lives, and we can begin to change the world.
Robert Ingersoll, one of the towering humanists of the 19th century, wrote, "If abuses are destroyed, we must destroy them. If slaves are free, we must free them. If new truths are discovered, we must discover them. If the naked are clothed, if the hungry are fed, if justice is done, if labor is rewarded, if superstition is driven from the mind, if the defenseless are protected, and if right finally triumphs, all must be the work of our hands. The grand victories of the future must be won by us, and by us alone."
From ancient times, Rabbi Tarfon. Calypso's in the door.
My turn. Shabbat Shalom, all of you lovely people. Isaiah prophesied, "They shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore." The poet Yehuda Amichai wrote, "Don't stop after beating the swords into plowshares. Don't stop. Go on beating and make musical instruments out of them. Whoever wants to make war again will have to turn them into plowshares first."
Naaseh shalom, shalom ba'olam. Naaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. V'himru shalom. Naaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Shalom. Naaseh shalom, shalom. Naaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol ha'olam. Ve'imru shalom. In this community where we find strength and common purpose, we turn our minds and hearts toward all those who need our love and support. Those who are ill, those who suffer pain of the body or spirit, those who are lonely, those who have been wronged. Tonight, our well wishes are extended to these members of our community and their loved ones, to Joe Gaden, Ruthie Goldman, and Rabbi Peter Schweitzer. If there's somebody that you're thinking about tonight, please feel free to share their names with the congregation. We'll start on this side. Anybody over here? Anybody on this side? Thank you. Anyone else who is ill or in need of our thoughts or support? May all who suffer know that they are not alone, that we are there. May they be healed quickly. May they experience a refuah shlema, a complete recovery, the renewal of their bodies, and the renewal of their spirits. May the source of strength that dwells so deep within us help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Shalom. The renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Shalom.
In particular, memoriam of Libby Sherbin and Flo Halpern, and of my father, Irving Feldman. If I should die and leave you here a while, be not like others sore undone, who keep long vigil by the silent dust. For my sake, turn again to life and smile, nerving thy heart and trembling hand to do something, to comfort other hearts than mine. Complete these dear unfinished tasks of mine, and I perchance may therein comfort you.
Our thoughts turn to those who are no longer with us, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every people and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. We recall now our loved ones whom death has recently taken from us, those who died at this season in years past, and those whom we have taken into our hearts with our own. Tonight, our community mourns, as Rosalie mentioned, the recent deaths of Libby Sherbin and of Florine Halpern, who died peacefully this morning at her home. The memorial for Florine is currently being planned, but is expected to take place on the mid-morning of December 12th. Together with them, we also remember these people whose yahrzeits are observed this week. Shirley Belkin, Ben Biderman, Rose Bowman, Marilyn Orphus Bricker, Matilda Citron, Sadie Cohen, Bernard Davis, Betty Events, Irving Feldman, Sam Finkelstein, Joel Foreman, Dorothy Frank, Cantor Israel Fuchs, Diana Ginsburg, Samuel Ginsburg, Celia Goldsmith, Ida Guss, Marguerite Harris, Madeline Jacobs, Molly Litke, Priscilla Molnar, Gertrude Pinkney, Sylvia Paul, Arthur Rice, Helen Rice, John Sloan, Joseph Vidra, David Walker, and Lael Whitney. There's someone whom you're remembering tonight, as we did earlier for those who are ill. Yes. Thank you. Anyone else on this side? Jean? Yes, in the back. Anybody on this side at all? Yes. Renee? Did we miss anyone at all? We say, Yehi zichram livracha. May the memories that we have of these dear people provide us with some measure of comfort as we face our lives without them. If you can do so comfortably, please rise as together we recite our humanistic interpretation of Kaddish. Nitkadal v'nitkadash beruach ha'adam. Let us dignify and ennoble all people in the spirit of our shared humanity. Let us acclaim the preciousness of life. Let us show gratitude for life by approaching it with reverence. Let us embrace the whole world even as we wrestle with its parts. Let us each in our own way take up our share in serving the world and seeking truth. May our commitment to life help us to strengthen healing of spirit and peace of mind. May justice and peace permeate and comfort the house of Israel and all those who dwell on earth. And let us say, Ken Yehi, may it be so. Please be seated. We didn't plan any special music tonight, did we? All right. So you'll have to excuse my voice. I went 3 weeks ago, we went to visit the grandkids, and they were completely healthy until we left and found out they had not been completely healthy and left us with something called metapneumovirus, which is not as bad as it sounds, but it lasts a long time, and my voice has just not come back. You know, I never shut up anyway, so that's part of it. But, so it's of my own making. So I will try to keep the volume as loud as possible, but if you hear me trailing off, it's the human metapneumovirus. I wouldn't have known that, but he was tested, and we all got it. It's one of the longest lasting upper respiratory cold kind of things you can get. Avoid it at all costs. Stay away from your grandchildren. No, I'm kidding. We're going back to see them again, because why not? All right, well, now that the laughter has been achieved, we'll begin the tears. about the news that I bring you that obviously you're already aware of from the headlines in what happened at the beginning of last month, actually. It's almost been one full month since this election took place in Israel. And just a few preliminary notes about the election itself. Then we'll talk about the results. We'll talk about the new players that you've not heard of. We'll talk about what can be expected, maybe our worst fever dreams. And we'll wrap it all up with, if we have a little bit of time, some questions on that. So first of all, let's talk about who voted, the turnout. I'll do a little breakdown later. But it was a very high turnout. It was 58%. That's sort of approaching our territory lately, which is not bad for any democracy. But in this case, the results don't make us feel so happy, hippy, hoopy, because as we've seen, they were not good for anybody who believes in liberal democracy and some of the values that we call Jewish values, at least in our communities. The voting patterns, in terms of the two blocks, we'll look at the blocks in a moment. The voting patterns were exactly the same as the last election and almost exactly the same as election before. So let's turn the slide there. Oh, there, see, Arthur's, he's anticipating me. So if you look at the bottom right, you'll see this graphic that has the two gentlemen, one that you obviously know, Benjamin Netanyahu. The other is the, sadly now, shortest serving prime minister in the history of the country, because the deal that he had with Naftali Bennett, who was the previous prime minister, was that should the government fall, they would rotate and Yair Lapid would take over. By the way, Yair Lapid, an amazing guy, son of, I would say, one of the non-movement, but nevertheless one of the great secular and humanistic Jews of all time. If you've never heard of Tomi Lapid, you should definitely look him up, Holocaust survivor, etc. All right, let's get the voice going. So what happened this time is that due to a number of, I would say, mistakes on the parts of some of the parties in here it's on the it's in the red, which is generally the color of the left, even though this was not a left coalition. Due to some mistakes in the way that they ran their campaigns, and more importantly, ran their decisions about who to run with, while the blocks seem very much different, the voting patterns were the same. The problem was that we have three basic blocks. We have the bright red, which was the anti-Netanyahu coalition. And the anti-Netanyahu coalition is not a right or left coalition. It's an all-encompassing coalition. It ran from Meretz, the far left of the Zionist parties, all the way to Yamina, which was Naftali Bennett's religious and Zionist group. The name, by the way, Yamina, means rightward, and that was very much where they were. But they all agreed that there had to be a different or better way to do things, and they were joined by one of the parties, Ra'am, which was run by, it is still headed by Mansour Abbas, by the way, a nationalist Muslim, a very sort of right-wing Muslim. There are four parties, but they all have different tastes and tenors to them. And because of the way that they ran together and separately and shared votes when they could, we had a different situation. We had basically enough to block Netanyahu. That didn't happen this time. Why didn't it happen? Well, one of the Arab parties failed to meet the threshold of 3.25% of the voters, which would allow you into the Knesset. It's always calculated on the basis of how many voters there were, and there were a lot of voters. And they did not make it. They also did not engage in any sharing vote deals, although that wouldn't have affected this case. Meretz, which was the party that Rabbi Wein was particularly fond of, Shulamit Aloni, you may remember her. That party failed to join together with the Labor Party, and therefore they really gave up some strength. They could have had as many as 7 seats. And that was really the difference right there. The fact that they did not make wise decisions allowed Netanyahu's 64-seat clean majority to get in. And I will tell you, this is the most ideologically unified government that we have ever seen in Israel, period. So who are the parties? Well, I've circled the ones that are the winners there. The losers were Yesh Atid under Yair Lapid. Certainly did very well with 24, but not well enough to join with anyone to block Netanyahu. So they're really out of the ballgame altogether. He ran last time along with Benny Gantz, who was a military leader. These folks, by the way, are not really, they may be a little left of center in Israeli terms, but they're really, some of them are a little bit right of center too. So again, this was not an ideological slate that ran this time or last time. This time is two. Yisrael Beitenu, you can see there, which means Israel is our home. That's historically a right-wing party. Also got 6 seats. Started before that as a Russian emigre party and has been all over the map in terms of their philosophy. And Labor, which was, of course, the founding party of the State of Israel's first coalition, 4 seats, which was what you had to achieve in order to get in. 3 1/4 automatically meant 4 seats. Let's go to the next slides. Let's talk about what you don't know. And what you don't know probably is who these people are that are now taking over. You certainly are aware of who Benjamin Netanyahu is, but from left to right here, we have the main players in the new party. The new party is a replacement for, in many ways, Yamina. With Yamina having gone over to a coalition with the left, its own voters abandoned it, and it did not even make 3% of the vote. So they were out of the picture altogether. In their place came a far more right-wing radical group, if you can imagine such a thing. It's called the Religious Zionist Party. By religious Zionists, we mean people who are nationalists, or, they call themselves Israeli Zionist, whatever, who are also on the religious side of that spectrum. In some ways, usually they're more modern Orthodox Jews, but that's changing in Israel. What's changing is that even the religious Zionists are moving to the right religiously. That's a new thing. In the past, to be a modern Zionist meant to be a modern person, which is why you could be a Zionist, as opposed to the older Orthodox Jews and the more traditional, who eschewed Zionism because the Messiah hadn't come. These mechanics and these theological, political ideas have been shifting for 20 years now, and the result is this election. The party ran under the title the Religious Zionist Party, but in fact only one of the 3 factions was and will continue to be called the Religious Zionist Party. That was the one and is the one headed by the man on the left, whose name is Bezalel Smotrich. They received, the way that the parties aligned it, the 3 among them, 8 of the 15 seats. The second set of seats went to the horribly named Jewish Power Party, Otzma Yehudit, Jewish Power Party, or Jewish Strength, either one. And that is led by this gentleman, I say that advisedly, in the middle here, named Itamar Ben-Gvir. Itamar Ben-Gvir, I'll tell you a little bit more about him in a moment. They were allocated from the slate that ran together 5 of those seats. So they have 5 MKs. The third, who's the gentleman here on the lower right, is a man named Avi Maoz. They only had 1 seat that got in from the Noam, which the name means pleasantness, but I'll tell you it's not a very pleasant party. They only got 1 seat, but still 15 seats together, and then they split into their own factions, but they have to negotiate or have been negotiating into the coalition separately. Let's go to slide 4, and I'll begin to tell you who each of these people are. Bezalel Smotrich is a 42-year-old, obviously Orthodox Jew. His father was an Orthodox rabbi, and he grew up in religious Zionism. He did not grow up in a movement that eschewed or rejected Zionism, as many of the Haredi means ultra-Orthodox, as many of the Haredi used to. He grew up studying at Merkaz Harav Kook, which was one time was a very centrist kind of organization. And then he went on to much more radical yeshivas. He served in the IDF on the general staff. He's a lawyer. He also has an MA in public and international law. He's worked in a number of different government areas, But what is of importance to us ideologically is that he's one of the founders of what's called the Regavim movement. Regavim means like clumps of dirt. And this is to associate it with the lands, particularly in the West Bank. He ran a yeshiva in a settlement called Kedumim and was involved in a number of settlement and settlement-related organizations. His activism in Regavim led to it led to the moment when he came to the public eye, which was in 2005, when he was among the most staunch and vocal opponents of the disengagement from Gaza. Whatever else you remember about it, whatever else you think about it, the majority of the Israelis wanted that. They really were at least under the you might say illusion, but the belief that Gaza would go on to become an independent country and supported it. These folks most certainly did not. His opposition was so strong that he was arrested and spent 3 weeks in jail. He is also among these religious Zionists who are on the right wing culturally of the country. Not all are, but they are beginning to be more and more on the right wing. He is notoriously anti-gay, promoting American-style family values. In 2006, Arthur and I went to Israel for World Pride that was held in Jerusalem. It was a wonderful transnational, trans-ethnic, trans-religious event. And at the same time that we were there, he, assisted by Ben-Gvir, I believe, my memory doesn't fail me, held an anti-gay sodomy, bestiality pride festival on Ben Yehuda Street in downtown Jerusalem, the center of the secular shopping center, if there is anything secular left in Jerusalem. And I got into a shouting match with these guys. So that's when I met them, was in 2006. We did not have coffee later and discuss it. In 2013, he joined the Takuma Party, originally allied with Naftali Bennett, from whom he became disillusioned. He opposes, obviously, the creation of a Palestinian state. The options that he believes, and that this is not government policy, but the options that he believes should be given are that the Arabs leave, that they accept they're under rule by a Jewish state, or that they fight back and will be defeated. That's what he said. Did he campaign on this? Not overtly, but these are his well-known stances. He favors annexing the disputed territories, the West Bank particularly, legalizing outposts built on Palestinian-owned land that have not been ever approved by the government, and there are several. He continues to demonize gay and lesbian and transgender citizens. He has even advocated for the segregation of Arab and Jewish women in hospitals, in birthing wards. That's what we're doing. What did he say when he said this? Is just recently. It's only natural that my wife would not want to lie next to someone who just gave birth to a baby that might murder her baby in another 20 years. Okay, that's the leader of this coalition. But again, the coalition, this three little parties, he's the leader now of the RZP. Let's go to the next slide, if you would, Arthur. This is Itamar Ben-Gvir. He's actually the one I knew best, just from following his career. He's 46-year-old, grew up in Mevaseret Zion, which is not in the territories. He was from a secular Sephardic family. His father was a laborer, his mother a Kurdish Jewish immigrant activist. She had also been a member of the Irgun as a child. He grew up, but as a teenager was not religious until a little bit later, until he was starting to approach his late teens, early 20s. And that was a result of his, I suppose, what he would have described as his change of points of view during the first Intifada in the 1980. He started his activism in right-wing youth movements affiliated with Moledet, a party that explicitly advocated the transfer of Arabs out of the state of Israel, not even just the West Bank, but the entire state of Israel, and then was truly radicalized when he joined the youth movement of Kach, which was the name of Meir Kahanas, who spoke here, I believe, right? Right here from this very bima. Debated Sherwin Wine, I understand. Meir Kahane did. Anyway, and then became leader after Kahane's assassination in the United States, became leader of the Kahane Chai Party, Kahane Lives Party. That party was eventually designated a terrorist organization and outlawed by the Israeli government, but nevertheless, with more and more right-wing governments and more right-wing judiciary coming aboard, its heirs have been legitimized. He became the youth coordinator of Kach, that's the name of their party. After a number of run-ins with the law, he was convicted of incitement to racism, obstruction of justice, support for terrorism. The IDF would not take him, so he's never served in the Israeli military. He was too radical for them. He studied law. He was originally barred from the bar exam by the Israel Bar Association, but he appealed that and subsequently did become a member of the bar, and he was famous for a very long time for defending right-wing protesters and terrorists. In the 1980s, 90s, he became active in the protests against the Oslo Accords, particularly against Yitzhak Rabin. A few weeks before the assassination of the prime minister, he appeared on television brandishing a Cadillac emblem, that was the car that the prime minister used to ride around in, saying, "We got to his car and we're going to get to him too." But he was not charged with anything. He was appointed in 2009 as a parliamentary assistant to Michael Ben-Ari, who founded this Otzma Yehudit, Jewish Strength or Jewish Power Party. He is the most radical figure, including Bezalel Smotrich, to ever be elected to high status in the Knesset. For years, he sported on the walls of his office a photo of Baruch Goldstein, the American physician who murdered 29 Muslims in the Marat HaMechpelah, the Cave of the Patriarchs. There's a mosque and a synagogue in it in Hebron. In 1994, I'm sorry, he hung that in his Kiryat Arba home, which is a settlement adjacent to the Cave of the Machpelah. He only removed it in 2019 after it became a threat to Naftali Bennett, who was running on a slate and had previously employed him, but it didn't change Bennett's mind. He's still separated from the guy. Ben-Gvir has tried to become more moderate, or at least appear so, in recent years. He says he no longer considers Goldstein a hero. Well, wasn't that lovely? When his supporters recently chanted the ubiquitous Mavet La'Aravim, Mavet La'Aravim, do you know what that means? Death to the Arabs, death to the Arabs. He corrected them and said, no, from now on we'll say Mavet LaTerroristim, Mavet, the death to the terroristim. When he was elected as a member of this joint list, he was certainly no moderate. Last year, during the internal violence that you may recall broke out during all of what was happening with Gaza and the rockets, you may recall there were riots in joint Jewish-Arab towns inside Israel's Green Line. On both sides, the violence took place. He was accused by the police commissioner at the time of fanning the flames of violence between Jews and Arabs in places like Akko, and in Lod in particular. He set up an office last, I want to say February, a faux office in Sheikh Jarrah, which was another flashpoint, a settlement located, located in an Arab neighborhood of northern Jerusalem, which caused all of those uprisings that we saw last winter. And on it goes. In fact, I'm going to scroll faster because it will take me all night to talk about this man's criminality. What happened was this religious Zionist party was created by Netanyahu. He took all of the people who had now turned their back on Naftali Bennett and Ayelet Shaked, which had formerly been the right-wing Zionist religious party, although she's not religious, and he said, look, you guys, if you've run separately, nothing good will happen. But if you run together, you will garner enough votes for me to get elected. And so I'm brokering this deal with you. He put together this monster, and he was right, because it attracted an enormous number of votes. And the results, of course, are the 64 that we had, which was way better than the 61 that he needed. His party's most prominent positions are encouraging Arab citizens of Israel to emigrate, to annex the West Bank without affording Palestinians any right to vote or civil rights whatsoever, to impose the death penalty automatically for terrorists, to, rather than using rubber bullets or other mitigating ammunition such as that, to switch to live fire against Palestinian rioters, to call for immunity from prosecution for IDF soldiers for military actions they carry out. Just this week, they're not even in office yet. Keep in mind, they are not yet in office. Just this week, he attacked the commander of the group where I don't know if you heard about it, a leftist Israeli settler was punched around at a small protest in Hebron. It was all videotaped. And it was the kind of thing you'd see. I mean, it really didn't look so much different than some of the police brutality in America. And his commander ordered him 10 days in jail and all kinds of other suspensions and punishments. And Ben-Gvir came out publicly and admonished this commander, whom he has no official role over and probably won't, from that perspective. And it created an enormous scandal in Israel, because up until now there's been this idea that the military is the military and the civilians are the civilians, and the two are run separately, much like we have it. Whether it works or not, that's the ideal that they grew up with. You know, we question it here too. We question it. Remember what happened at Lafayette Park when Trump used our military to sweep people out of the way. So that's really created a big scandal here, and it did create a scandal in Israel. One of the reasons he is liked so much by Netanyahu is that he has also been in the forefront of trying to pass what's called, I believe it's called the Norway law, that says a sitting prime minister cannot be prosecuted. And as you know, Netanyahu is still facing a lot of stuff. Also, by the way, an opponent of LGBTQ rights, but has not been quite as vocal about it in recent times. Let's turn to slide 6. This gentleman, Avi Maoz, I mentioned to you, he's a real anomaly here. People who remember him from earlier, he's 66 years old, he's not a child. People who remember him from earlier in his career remember a nice centrist fella who was a religious Orthodox Jew, who was ready to, reach over the aisle to other kinds of Jews, other kinds of people, and it just has not gone that way with him. He is a settler, but he's a settler in Gush Etzion, which has this kind of a special status in Israeli eyes because it was a settlement going back to the late 1800s, early 1900s, I believe, the whole Gush, the whole area of kibbutzim, and he in fact established a kibbutz. He reestablished a kibbutz, a religious Orthodox kibbutz called Migdal Oz, which I've visited on a number of occasions. He became a rabbi in the 1980s, and it seems that this is when he began to radicalize, maybe about 20 years ago. He began in politics, oddly enough, with the Russian Immigrant Party, but his stances on Jewish identity, perhaps because of experiences with those people, I don't know, led him to become a staunch opponent of non-halachic Jews. That is to say, Jews who were either not converted by Jewish law or who did not have a matriarchal, matrilineal line through Judaism, a through line from mom to mom's mom, etc. He's also a major opponent of gay rights. All right, let's go to slide number 7. Slide number 7 is just to remind you there were 2 other parties that came in addition to Netanyahu. These are 2 of the most stable parties in Israel. A reminder that on the left we have Shas. Shas is the Sephardic Haredi party. They are more or less, they are a Zionist party. There's no question about that anymore. They are a Zionist party. They are, the Haredim, the ultra-Orthodox Sephardim in Israel, are not a very large group, but they also attract non-Haredi Sephardim, and always have, because they don't have a reform, a conservative, this and that. You want to go to the beach, that's your business on Shabbat. But it's sort of like I was compared to the Catholics in America. The church is the church is the church. We support the church, even if we don't agree with all of their religious stances and so forth. That's how Sephardic Jewry operates. And so they always pick up a bunch of votes from them, probably more than half. And this is, in some ways, a religious Zionist party of its own. but one that has a special heart for its Haredi, very ultra-Orthodox leadership. And all males, by the way, 100%. They got 11 seats. It's about typical for them. They usually get between 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there. The other party, the United Torah Judaism, there's like 20 of them there, but only 7 got seats. They always get the same 7 seats. Why? These are the Ashkenazic Haredi ultra-Orthodox Jews. Half of them are Hasidim, half of them are non-Hasidim. They rotate their leadership. They only want one thing, and that's welfare for their people and stipends for the yeshivas bookers. Shas shares that with them. They want exemptions for military service and so forth. They always ask for the same thing. They have served in left-wing governments and right-wing governments. They have not for a while, though, been with the left. They used to go with whoever won. But for a while now, they've been considered natural partners of the right because they have overall right-wing views on things, as you can imagine. The things they tend to get involved in are housing, because that's where money is, finance committee, the interior, because that's where Jewish identity is determined, although they're not going to get pushback anymore from the other partners, except maybe Likud. Likud may now be the liberal hope of Israel when it comes to Jewish identity, not when it comes to anything else. And Netanyahu has already stated that the status quo on religion and state issues is going to be preserved, not going to allow any changes there. That means to the left or the right. So anybody who hoped to get mass transit on Shabbat can kiss that goodbye. But that the bloc will act together through mutual commitment. And keep in mind, he does have the majority of the seats, so he can control that. All right, slide number 8, please. So who were the voters? Who got these people on into the Knesset, these 15 people that have now changed, possibly forever, the course of Israeli history? Well, like in a lot of other countries, their votes come from radical political forces on the edges, from poor and marginalized communities. In Ben-Gvir's case, the voters came from a Mizrahi majority, Eastern. Mizrahi, you know, is the word for Eastern. We tend to use the word Sephardi, but really the more proper term is Eastern. These are people from anywhere from, you know, their parents and grandparents from Syria to Kurdistan to Iraq to Turkey to Morocco, Tunisia, Egypt, you name it. If it's an Arab country where there were Jews living, Yemen, this is what we mean by Mizrahi. They viewed this as a way of voting for the right without voting for Likud, with whom they become disillusioned. They, however, were the reason that the right originally came into power. Anybody know what year that was? The first year that the right took power in Israel? 1977, Menachem Begin, and he had these people to thank for him. He, of course, was far from being a Mizrahi Jew, a Holocaust survivor from Poland. They are concerned with violence in development towns, crime waves, inter-ethnic tension, and primarily feelings about fear and loathing, I guess I should say, of the Palestinians, both inside Israel and in the West Bank. But an analysis of their voters reveals, just as it did when our voters began to be examined more carefully, that it wasn't just people that were on the fringes. There have been a number of analyses of who voted for whom. They're starting to come out. I'll give you an example. One of the Gush Etzion settlements is Efrat. I showed a film here several years ago when I was trying to debunk what settlements were. You know, settlements are not a bunch of caravans, a bunch of trailer homes in a circle. They are full-fledged suburb. West Bloomfield, okay? I'm not kidding and I'm not exaggerating. That's what we're talking about. And in the case of Efrat, upper middle class to upper class. Beautiful homes, malls, schools, community centers, you name it. Very, very close to Jerusalem. A lot of people who work in Jerusalem live in Efrat and other parts of that Gush. It's so many American emigres there that in Israel it's called suburban Scarsdale. 48% of their votes went to that list. 48%. The most of any party. Likud got 21%. I assume that some of the center parties got the rest. No one on the left. Virtually nobody on the left. Maybe somebody's kid who, had decided that they belonged to the left and might have been visiting. But otherwise, no. They indicated in interviews, as all voters of all of these blocs, but particularly Shas, the Zionist part, the religious Zionist coalition, and Likud, a deep distrust of Arabs, particularly of Arabs serving the Israeli parliament, genuine fears for their own safety, living among what they called, and this was both in the Green Line and outside the Green Line, a hostile Palestinian population. Of course, the left in Israel died quite a while ago, but today will be represented only by the Labor Party. You can't in any way consider Yesh Atid, which was Yair Lapid's party. It means there's a future. Not a future for them right now. You can't in any way consider them a left-wing party. In fact, they have a lot of former Likudniks in it. And Benny Gantz's party, with National Union or something, also has a lot of people from the right of center. So there is no left in Israel anymore. This is very, very different. It's important to understand to what's happening in the United States. Clearly, we all understand politics in the United States much better than we understand Israeli politics, so I don't need to explain what's happening here. But here, the younger people, Generation Z and the younger millennials and even the older millennials, they're what's saving us, right? I mean, they're the reason what happened in our November happened in our November. And it's the reason that our red, which of course is the right, is so scared that they have to make up boogeymen. They have to make up trans people roaming the streets to, trying to kidnap your children or groom them. I mean, pedophiles everywhere, right? Which, by the way, most of the pedophiles, we know where they come from. In Israel, though, they don't feel and have no need to make up an enemy. There's an actual opposition there in the Palestinians. I don't care what you feel about Palestinian rights, and I am very in favor of another state or something happening, which is at this point, I believe, a fantasy and have for quite some time. There's nobody in, I don't know, where were we this week? Antrim County, Michigan, who's hiding in a bunker because the transgenders are coming. That's made up bullshit. But in Israel, there are rockets that fall. There is terrorism that happens. There are trains that blow up. And these people perceive this as the existential threat. The young people in Israel are not becoming more liberal. They are not American Jews. They are becoming more right-wing. They, in fact, are the power of the right. The left were the older generations, and those generations are disappearing. So I want to make sure that that's understood. All right, let's go to slide number 9. All right, what can we expect from these people and the government coming? And here I just have a little picture of everybody. So let's first talk about the 3 newcomers and what's coming to them now. I talked about what the United Torah Judaism would get, and I talked about what Shas would get. It's the same old thing with them all the time. But here is who and what the 3 leaders of these pieces of this new entity are going to receive. Well, Avi Maoz, the older guy there, he was the first to make a deal, and he's sort of been put in charge of Jewish identity. He's going to be a deputy minister in a new authority for Jewish identity in the prime minister's office. Now, I believe Netanyahu's goal is to keep him on a very tight leash. Netanyahu does not want to tighten up notions of Jewish identity. He's not a religious Jew, and this isn't in his bailiwick. And there's a lot of reasons for it. One is that it will alienate what is left of American Jewish support, which is very, very much on the table right now and in danger. But also, it endangers his ability to bring in new immigrants to feed the Jewish population. So I think that's what's going to be happening to him. But he will be responsible now for processing Jewish immigration, particularly from the former Soviet Union, which we continue to see, particularly with what's happening in Russia and Ukraine. He would like to change the law of return to eliminate eligibility for Jewish immigration to Israel by non-matrilineal grandchildren, meaning that if your mother's mother was not Jewish, you're no longer eligible. Current law of return was, I hate to tell you this, but it's true, the law of return as we have it today was written by Adolf Hitler. And that's not an exaggeration. Whoever Hitler considered a Jew, Israel considers a Jew for purposes of immigration. Not necessarily, because that was the whole point of the state, right? Was to save the Jews. But that has been on the table now for 30, 40 years, because the Orthodox don't like this. They don't want conversions that are not their own, and they don't want people who are not halakhically Jewish, or at least have one Jewish parent, coming in. That's the furthest they're willing to negotiate. This would invalidate non-Orthodox conversions for Aliyah completely. Not that there's such a big rush on them, but it's symbolically important to the reform movement, to the conservative Reconstructionist movements in the United States, whose conversions, at least abroad, have always been recognized. And throughout my career and throughout any reform or conservative rabbi's career, we've undoubtedly been asked by many a convert to sign a paper, and the Israeli government would accept it for purposes of immigration. This would end. He also opposes women's enlistment to the IDF. That may be another reason he's being kept under lock and seal in the Prime Minister's office, because that's not going through. He would like to get rid of he would like to bring in conversion therapy for LGBTQ. They debate that in Israel too. But I think that essentially what's going to happen is this guy's going to be sealed up in a little jar in the Prime Minister's office and hopefully not able to do much damage. Netanyahu said just this week, Israel's not going to be governed by Talmudic law. We're not banning LGBT forums or groups. We're not adopting the prohibition of rights to people who deserve it under Israeli law. Now, getting that guy out of the way and all of those things that are very important to American Jews and some Israelis, let's talk about what's going to happen with Ben-Gvir. He has just accepted the position, a newly created position known as the National Security Minister. This is essentially what used to be known as the domestic security, or whatever word you want to use to translate it. He's the police commissioner. He's above the police commissioner. It's an expanded version of that. It will be kind of a national police, I don't know what you'd want to call him, czar. Now, what's particularly worrying about this is that it will include oversight of both the national police, as that office always has, like England and other places, they have a national police force. And he will be taking over through an appointed delegate who will be in the Ministry of Defense, oversight of Mishmar HaGavul, the border police. I say this with great care because one of my dearest friends as a relative was a member of the border police when they did their service, but these people have a reputation already of being, shall we say, on the brutal end of police brutality. For him to take charge of this, and understand, we're not talking about border police, somebody in some far off border up in, on the Syrian Golan Heights area. We're talking about wherever the green line is, wherever there's passage inside Israel. That's what we're talking about, from areas A and B into area C. Smotrich, yesterday, late last night, he finally finalized his agreement to come into the coalition. He is going to become the finance minister. He may rotate this with the leader of Shas. By the way, that guy I showed you, he spent some time in jail too. But like a good Shas member, it was for financial crimes back in the 80s and 90s. Now, what this is going to mean too, though, is that one of its own members is going to then enter the defense ministry as an assistant defense minister in charge of the civil administration. What is the civil administration? It's a very, very anodyne sounding kind of office, right? What the civil administration does is administer civil law from Israel in Israeli controlled territory in the West Bank, Area C, which is to say, Israel has not annexed the West Bank. So in order for a citizen of Israel who lives in Efrat, or who lives in Kedumim, or Ariel, these are big, giant cities inside the West Bank, in Israeli-controlled territory, they have to authorize a law under the Oslo Accords every few years called the civil administration. Without this law, two Israelis getting in a car accident in Efrat have to call the military in, because the world and Israel has acknowledged this is a military occupation. But with this law, under the Oslo Accords, the Palestinians get to do it, control their own car accidents in their territories, and the Israelis get to do it in Area C for their own citizens. It also means that he has oversight over an enormous number of things in Area C. Area C is where all of the settlements are. Exclude Jerusalem. Whether you consider it a settlement or not, Israel doesn't, and the Oslo Accords did not address it. But outside of Jerusalem, they control infrastructure, building permits, roads, all agricultural issues, hookups to water, building permits, building demolitions, permits to build and to add on to homes, legalization of outposts, and so forth and so on. Whoever is in charge now of the civil administration, with the power of the finance ministry behind them, will have a great deal of influence in this area. That and the right-wing tilt, increasingly, of the courts, which used to be, they don't have lifetime appointments of the courts there. People have terms, and they used to have a very neutral process to replace judges. That's why you have the High Court frequently overturning Israeli law. That already has been under threat and has changed over time. Under this government, it will unlikely change forever, at least until something very different happens. So when it comes to diaspora and domestic affairs, Smotrich's party, as I mentioned, will control Aliyah and immigration absorption. They will, of course, partner up with the United Torah Judaism, the Haredi Ashkenazim, and with Shas, the Sephardi Haredim, to eliminate non-Orthodox converts. World Jewry is going to be up in arms. This is not going to be a smooth process. And Jewish engagement with Israel in the United States and other parts of the diaspora are going to once again, are going to probably reach limits like those we've never seen before. All of this is going to depend on how Netanyahu can rule his coalition and how much he can restrain them. But he's going to have some tough job. And as we all know, he has not had a friendly relationship with too many Democrats in the United States, and Democrats are clearly on the rise as we look at things right now. And he placed his bet with the evangelicals, from whose wings we're now experiencing in this country such an enormous rise in anti-Semitism. I'm not saying the evangelicals are doing it. What I'm saying is it's coming from the right wing of the Republican Party. And by the way, it's taken too damn long for the United States to recognize this. I talked to a friend today who lives in Georgia, of all places. I'm going to go on a little side rant. Who lives in Georgia, of all places, and did not know that Marjorie Taylor Greene had spoken and co-sponsored a full weekend conference with Nick Fuentes. And thank goodness we all know that name now. I hate being the only person to know these names. Putting that aside, remember that one of the great purposes of Israel, I was raised that this would be one of the great purposes of Israel, was to provide a place of refuge. Should there ever be this anti-Semitic monster patrolling for us in the streets, as has happened so often in America, not in America, but in world history, how can we now turn to that country for any hope? The condemnation that came from Netanyahu of Trump's hates-giving dinner, you read my commentary, that's what I've called it. His condemnation sounded like, what's his name McCarthy. It was a shame. He shouldn't have done it. I hope he doesn't do it again. So this is where we are right now. It's a brand new day. I have no positive, happy thoughts to share. There's never been a government like this in Israel before. I don't know what it means. I only know what's happening. And that's why I call this a wrap-up. I'll be happy to answer your questions to the extent that I can, or if you want to share your comments. I'm wearing my reading glasses, so give me a chance to change over so I can see what I'm looking at. And it's not just random hand on left. Let's see. It's Rosalie. I did. But remember, I did it very unhappily. We always have a little ongoing, but I was very unhappy about it. So go back, Arthur, if you will, to the map I had up. I think it's couple more back. Might have been there it is. All right, so this is Area C. As you can see here, all the red is Area C. The rest is Area A and B. In Area A, Palestinians have supposedly complete control. That's been violated a few times. And in Area B, Israel controls the security. The Palestinian Authority controls civil matters. So Area A is approximately 60% of the West Bank. All Israel has to do is call a vote to annex it. That's how they did it with the Golan, which now has some measure of international acceptance. And that's how they did it with Jerusalem, which has a few crumbs here and there. No, a vote of the Knesset. A vote of the Knesset. That's all it would take. Now, whether they would do that or not, given the amount of opposition they're going to receive from the entire world, is up for grabs. But as we've seen, the entire world is changing in a lot of ways, and Israel is the least of its interest right now. What Netanyahu has put his faith in, and he may be very correct in having done this in terms of realpolitik, is peace with the Arab countries that used to oppose him, to oppose Israel. And that's what the Abraham Accords were about. Whatever else you think about them, they were a weird kind of achievement because nobody was ever expecting that to happen. But people are aligned on different things now. So I don't know that it's going to happen. I think that there's still a lot of opposition to it in the United States, that's for sure. Also, China opposes it, although I don't think they're going to speak out on it. Russia, I have no idea. But it really won't matter. Really what's going to matter is the United States. As long as we have the kind of government we have right now in the United States, I don't think that's going to happen. But it's really easy for it to happen. The basic laws basically require you. I do think it has to be an absolute majority. I would need to check on that, but I think it might have to be an absolute majority. But that's just of the Knesset again. And they have it. They have 64 seats. There's not a person in that majority who wouldn't like to have this happen right now. It will be Netanyahu who keeps it from happening. Somebody had their hand up over here. Renee and then David. So this is not something that, this is something that I think, again, Netanyahu is going to keep a very short leash on Ben-Gvir. Ben-Gvir has gone up a number of times to the Temple Mount. Nothing wrong with going up to the Temple Mount. I've been to the Temple Mount. But he goes up there for prayer and for politics. And for him, the two are indivisible. And he went up there not that long ago. I think he was one of the triggers, one of the May uprisings that we've had in the last few years. I believe he was a significant trigger of that. Ariel Sharon did it with this, and he triggered the second Intifada. You remember that. And it was not nearly as provocative when Sharon did it as when Ben-Gvir has done it. So we'll see. I don't think, unless there's, look, the one thing about a right-wing government that's quite authoritarian in some ways, when these people have power, they are in some ways, they're both inside and outside, right? So there's an inside way to control them. I don't know if they will, but I do think that it probably is unlikely that there's going to be a third temple. I don't see that ever happening, I hope. But, I don't make predictions anymore. I don't know what age you guys were when you stopped doing that, but I was like 2 years ago, and that was it. I was done. David. But it's not a Jewish lobby. Keep that in mind. Yeah. Well, there's a lot of different pieces to the American Jewish leadership. You are correct about AIPAC, but AIPAC is really not part of the Jewish piece of it anymore. The Jewish leaders of AIPAC are in many ways at loggerheads with the people who had federations and so forth, and certainly at loggerheads with the people who run the conservative reform and reconstructionist movement. Reconstructionist, conservative, and reform movements are horrified by what's going on and are going to make their voices known and heard, and have been in Israel. There's a reform rabbi in the Knesset, even to this day, from Israel. I understand, and I forgot what the date is, but I think this fall is going to be the largest mission ever sent by federations. You've probably been getting the mailings, right? I deleted them so often now that since I read it the first time, I can't remember the date. I hope none of my friends from Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Detroit are watching. But I think that what they're going to do with that mission is to make a very clear stance about the Jewish issues and about their own vision of Jewish values. And they're going to continue to do what they've been doing. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize is Israel used to get a lot of general funding from federations. And for a variety of reasons, not least of which was the need to invest more in Judaism here at home, that began to change well over 20 years ago. Nowadays, most of the funding that comes from federation to Israel is interest-specific. So cities have twin cities. They have specific causes they support in those areas. They tend to be social causes. They try to bring in Arabs that are nearby and here and there, Palestinians. The West Bank is off limits with most of these kinds of things. And they've been doing this for a long time. So when we talk about that part of our Jewish leadership, they've been very sensitive to this for a while. There's a lot of concern that there was too much Trumpism coming from Israel with a country, a Jewish community, whose young people are going exactly in the opposite direction. And even, let's be honest, when you exclude the Orthodox community, whose older people are not in that direction, by and large. Our boomers are still the most liberal boomers probably in the country. Even the Orthodox world, of which you know I'm very familiar, in the moderate camps, they're not 70-30 for the right wing in America. It's more like 50-50 as they have branched out. And you know, everybody's got a non-Orthodox papa or bubby or zaidi. Everybody's got family members. You know, some of them even have gay grandfathers, and it's a different world over here. What I think is really going to happen is that we're going to see American Jewry's grass-level approach to Israel stay very much there at the grassroots level. That our leadership in the religious movements and at the federation type level are going to continue to engage the government there where it's possible and shun the government where it's not possible. More and more, we're going to see groups like Teruah, which is the rabbinical call for social justice in the United States, and other organizations are going to be speaking louder and louder as they have been. This is going to continue. While this is in some ways a break for Israel, or an inflection point, if you will, I think that for the American Jewish community, there's been a certain steeling to get ready for this for a long time. So now, when you talk about the moneyed classes, the political side is very much in disarray. Democrats are going to have to come up with some kind of unified statement, although by and large, Israel has remained a bipartisan issue for American politicians. It stopped being a bipartisan issue for Israel. That's the problem. Israel and AIPAC made a choice of a party. The American parties did not. Hakeem Jeffries has come out with statements, but we're going to be talking about Israel, I think, more and more as American Jews, about Israelis, about our fellow Jews, about a population there that we care about. We're not going to be able to turn our back, and we shouldn't, on half the Jewish population of the world, more than half. And so I'm organizing, as most of you know, a secular Israeli experience next December with Adam Shalom under the auspices of our institute. And our goal is to go on the ground and meet secular Israelis. We'll be in the West Bank meeting Palestinians as well. We'll be inside the Green Line meeting Arabs and Jews, and to keep as many things grassroots as possible. because this government already, 75% of it, well, 50% of its members would not even have a cup of coffee with us. And that's true of most American Jews. And the other half, which is Netanyahu's half, has caused untold damage with their abandonment of bipartisanship. They're the ones who abandoned bipartisanship, not the American Democratic Party. So that's how I'm approaching it. I'm going to approach it by loving my friends in Israel, even as I despise what I see happening, and hoping for the best, which is what I told Rosalie a million times. We'll hope for the best. Marty, and then not. Yeah, and nobody knows what the hell's happening in Iran, so Iran might be a very strange kind of wild card. I don't know. I don't think anybody knows. I favored strongly and spoke in favor of, and still do, the arrangement that was made with Iran. But Iran has violated it in some cases. I think the world is ready to come back to the table again with Iran. But right now, Iran's got a lot of troubles of their own. I would sorely love to see, as I think we all would, freedom for the people of Iran, true freedom. Nabil, and then Natan. You got to talk real loud. Talk real loud. Right, well, we don't have that kind of time. I could be here for a week. Well, we're Jews, Nabil. It's of importance to us. Right. I made all of those points. Look, it is late in the evening. You and I have debated and talked about this. We're on the same side. We want rights for Palestinians. We agree, and I spoke about it at length tonight. The civil administration, the denial of rights for Palestinians, how this is going to get inevitably worse. Okay. It is. So I believe that more than half my talk tonight was devoted to the issues around Palestinian Arabs and around Arabs living inside, around Arabs and Palestinians possessing Israeli citizenship. That was the entire issue that we're talking about. That's how they got elected. That's what's going on. And that was it. I presented it just as strongly as you did. There is not a killing every day. That is hyperbolic. But there is a flashpoint of violence every day. By the way, the terrorism on the trains and the buses and the things that have been having also are not making the headlines. And Jews are also not talking about it here. And the New York Times is not talking about it. This clash has been going on for a long time. We know who has the power. We're very upset about it. It's the whole reason we're talking about the Israeli government. And that's the entire point of tonight. But we are also concerned that these are our people. And we want them to represent our values in other ways as well. So if the conversation switches to how are we going to continue to also be brothers and sisters to the people we're so damn angry at for the same reasons you are, that's a legitimate discussion inside the Jewish community. We have plenty of people, and I've spoken up repeatedly about the need for our community to recognize the legitimacy of the voices and points of view of Jewish Voice for Peace, of If Not Now. I have written about it. I've talked to her. We're going to meet this week. But by the same token, we have to deal with the Jewish side of it. And the Jewish side of it is that we've let this down. But then again, we don't vote there. We're here tonight because we're concerned about it. If this were just a lovely paradise that had a few people that were too religious for us, nobody would be here tonight. We wouldn't be talking about it. We are absolutely concerned with everything you're saying. That's the entire point. So I don't mean to sound defensive, but it honestly was all I discussed early on. When I talked about Ben-Gvir, why are we so afraid of this man? We're not afraid of this man because he doesn't like gay people. I've got neighbors who don't like gay people. We're afraid of this man because he's going to be directing the border patrol, which is violent towards Palestinians. That's why we're afraid of him. That's why we're upset about this. It's the entire raison d'etre of this conversation. So I'm not angry. I'm trying not to be self-defensive because I don't defend it. I'm horrified by it. I think we're all horrified by it. I don't think any of us ever expected this to happen. But it's been going on in Israel for a long time. By the same token, yes, as a Jewish community facing half of our Jewish world, heading down this track, we're also astonishingly disappointed and very upset and a little bit nervous and scared too, because the Arab world is very large, and I think ultimately will wind up taking care of its own. Jewish world is very small, and a group of it that we thought at some point would represent our values as a democratic country. That's what they wrote in the Declaration of Independence. That's the dream and the wish, whether it was correct or not, that we expected. That's let us down. But it's absolutely because of the Palestinians in every way, shape, and form. So if I failed to convey that, I apologize. And if I looked a little bit too much at the relationship we have with our brothers, our sisters, our cousins who are over there, I guess I do it out of the fact that it's my family. But it is absolutely 100%, and I'm the first one who says it to them. Every time my friends come from Israel, and they tell me about this in Israel, and that in Israel, and the other thing in Israel, what's the first thing I say to them, Arthur? The problem is the Palestinians. How you're treating them, what you've done to them, what you're going to continue to do to them. I never don't say that to them. And it was the topic tonight. So if I wasn't upset enough about it, now you can see that I am. We cannot continue to treat the Palestinians this way as a people, and they are part of our people, but it's the reason we're not. It's the reason for the whole conflict between the Jews. Yeah. Natan, I'm sorry. And then we need to finish because I don't go but beyond 8:30. Oh. Quickly though. Actually, I have. You have a lot of other forums, so.
When I was living in Israel, both the left and the right were very, I was like, worried and I was like hopeful that what's curbing the right is how will the world react?
Yeah, we don't care anymore. They don't care anymore.
That's the thing. The whole world is going.
Because look what happened. These Abraham Accords gave them this sense of security.
Yeah. But what will happen if this coalition managed to permanently change
It would be a disaster for the Palestinians. The American Jewish community would mourn for generations, and the Israelis would go on.
Would they? No.
I don't know. I think they would.
They certainly would end up losing America.
You think so?
Maybe not immediately.
Let's see who's in American power.
What?
Let's see who's in power in America.
No. I mean, American Jewish support is not going to be there.
They don't depend on it anymore.
Even at best, won't be there as much as it used to.
They don't depend on it anymore. They made a choice. Yeah, one last question. Go ahead. Talk really loud, though, because you got your mask on. I think the American Jewish community is going to have a long row to hoe before they get to that position. Yeah. Well, you're already seeing that. You're already seeing that. I mean, look at how I stood up in front of the whole country. It's the first time I've ever done that to talk about Andy Levin because of what AIPAC was doing to him, and they were doing it to him because of this position, because he wanted justice for the Palestinians. A lot of us have taken risks in our community to call for justice for the Palestinians, and if I haven't made that clear enough, Nabil, I'm calling for it right now. That's what this whole damn thing is about, justice for the Palestinians, also for the Jews. But the Jews have it to take it now because they're in charge. Okay, so we'll talk after. We're gonna sing a song because I promised we wouldn't go more than an hour and a half. And Joseph has like a special thing that he does to me with a branding iron if I don't do 8:30. So sing, Joseph, sing.
Okay. Arab, Jew, Muslim, gay, straight, Hasidic, secular. How beautiful it is to live together in harmony. Hine matov u'manayim she'menahim gam yachad. Hine matov u'manayim she'menahim gam yachad. Behold how good it is when people dwell together, living as one people, hand in hand. What keeps us safe and strong is that we have each other, one human family across the land. Hine matov u'manayim she'metahim gam yachad. Hine matov u'manayim she'metahim gam yachad.
Thank you to Joseph, to David Weeks, who runs the streaming,
Shabbat
to Arthur
shalom.
for the slides, and to all of you. Shabbat Shalom.